We're talking Saquon Barkley, the draft, and all things New York Giants with Coach Gene Clemons of Giants Country. That's coming up next on the LockedOn Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. Patricia China here with you, and I am joined by Coach Gene Clemons, who writes for me over at Giants Country, writes for The Athletic. He's got his own YouTube channel. You guys have seen him before on this channel, and a lot of you have asked for him again, so here he is. And Coach Gene, always a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate all the people who like what I do. It's a labor of love, and you know how it is. You know, we just we look forward to whatever the next thing is, and right now it's been heavy amounts of free agent action for the Giants, which is interesting with how much draft capital that they have, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. So.
Yes, absolutely. We will talk a little bit about the draft and how the free agency activity has set up the draft. But one topic I want to start off with, and this is something you and I kind of started not debating, but we were discussing over on my Twitter feed when I mentioned Saquon Barkley and the possibility of trading him. And I know I've made a case for keeping him. I've made a case for trading him. You feel, I think, if I'm interpreting you correctly, that they should keep him.
Yeah, I don't see what the upside is of trading them. I think you're not going. So first off, you don't make a better team by trading away your best players. It's just never really been the way. If you look at the successful teams in the NFL, sans the New England Patriots, who tend to do things a little bit differently outside of Brady for all of the years. You usually find a way to try to keep your better players, whether that's by restructuring, moving money around, whatever it might be, but you find a way to keep your best players because that's how you win games. And because you can go from worst to first in the NFL more than any other sports league. And because you're able to do that, I think a lot of times people are really willing to push the panic button or to just say, hey, full reset. Well, the truth is there are no real full resets in the NFL. What you have in the NFL is we are going to make a few moves in hopes that it gets us to flip those 5 to 6 games that every team in the NFL has where one possession or one play meant the difference between a win or a loss. So for me, having a guy as versatile as Saquon Barkley in an offense that is going to be what we're kind of hoping is a mixture of what the Bills were doing and what the Chiefs were doing, understanding the value of the running back out of the backfield as a receiver, understanding the dynamics that he brings as a home run hitter. I just don't see why a team would want to get rid of a guy that they already have control of when he's probably at his worst value. Doesn't make any sense to me.
From a salary cap perspective, though, I think that's the driving force. Saquon is due to count for a guaranteed $7.2 million, which means unless you are going to extend him, you can't get that money off your books unless you trade him. I think that's what's driving the argument, and that's the number one argument for looking to move him. Especially, you've got people who are not yet convinced that he is in the long-term plans, because let's say he goes and he balls out this year. You're going to devote a lot of financial resources to him next year, knowing that there is a possibility that you're going to have to pay Daniel Jones if he balls out, and then you still have Andrew Thomas coming down the pipe who you probably are going to want to extend. So I think that's the number one reason that's driving this trade Saquon Barkley talk. That being said, Gene, I mean, running
trade
backs
high. That's all I say is trade high.
Trade
right?
high.
Don't trade low. Because what you said is correct, but you're not going to find a better option out there for $7 million. Not at that position, not at this time, not even in the draft. There's no Saquon Barkley's in the draft. So, like, $7 million, that's a good investment on a running back that's going to get, a heavy amount of snaps for you. And if he balls out, then guess what? Next year, you franchise him, you trade him. Like, if that's what you want to do, if you say, hey, we're not willing to commit this level of money and we can't find a number that's good for us and for Saquon, then you put the franchise tag on him and you Devontae Adams him. Like, that's what you do. But you don't sell when the market out there for people looking for a back right now is not high, and at a situation where people aren't really sure what Saquon they're getting. If anything, I think you could possibly see this happen. You could see Saquon Barkley start the season off healthy, somebody on another team go down, be looking for a running back, and now the Giants pop up as a possible trade option to trade him away in season. I think that might be something that's more viable than trading him right now for a 4th round pick or a 5th round pick. Like what are we doing? You don't trade number 1 overall picks for 4th and 5th round picks because you owe him $7 million. And by the way, they owe him that money. Like, from what they put in front of him over the past 3 to 4 years, they owe that man that money. And you could say they owe Daniel Jones from that same respect as well, even though I don't think we're talking about the same level of talent.
Now let me ask you this, because we hear this expression a lot. I personally think this is overused, but I'm going to ask you from a football coach perspective. We hear the phrase positional value. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, I've heard people say that is just so overblown, that there's really no such thing. I mean, where do you stand on that argument?
I think from a coach and evaluator standpoint, positional value was something that was made up by people that don't actually get their hands dirty. I think that positional value is another one of those words that are thrown out that allows people who don't actually evaluate talent to have a say at the table, because everybody devalues running backs, but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So if you say, hey, there's no value in taking a running back in the first round, so you don't take running backs in the first round, then you get a really good running back in the 2nd and 3rd round who 10 years ago would have went in the first round. You say, look, we got this person in the 2nd and 3rd round, but you only got them in the 2nd and 3rd round because you actively made a decision to stop drafting them in the first round. So it's self-fulfilling. We don't, the truth is we don't know what talent is going to be. We're all projecting talent and we're projecting health. What we do know is when Saquon Barkley was healthy and in a stable offense that had some type of direction, he was a 1,000 level back. And if you have a 1,000 level back, you don't just trade those guys away.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, speaking of talent evaluation, a lot of people say, don't look necessarily at the position a player plays, look at the overall grade. And I'm kind of transitioning a little bit
Big
here
board.
To the big board. Exactly. So, you look at a Kyle Hamilton, for example, he's a safety. All right. People are like, why in God's name would you take a safety number 1 overall? But yet there's a consensus out there that a Kyle Hamilton is the number 1 player, the top overall best player in this draft. When you are evaluating, do you say, okay, you know what? I don't care that this guy's a safety. I care that this guy is a complete football player. I'm going to figure out a way to fit this guy into what I do? Or do you just say, you know what, safety, I don't really want a safety. I want an edge rusher. I want a corner. Or I want this.
No, I don't think you ever just go, any position. Like, you need to make a decision on what your philosophy is going to be in the draft room. are we going to stick to the big board, or are we going to stick to highest need or most important for what we're trying to do? I would say I'm probably lower on Hamilton than most people are. I don't see him as the number one player in the draft. I actually don't think that he is that much better than some of the safeties that are behind him. So for me, the value wouldn't be there as far as taking him number one overall, because I look at who's number 2, 3, and 4. And I think that that's what a lot of people do when you're looking at drafting. Yes, and don't get me wrong, I think Hamilton's a talent. He's definitely a talent. But is him as a top 5 talent? Is the next safety a second round grade? Because if he's that good, then it makes sense to take him, because you can't get that in the second or third round. But I really believe when it comes to safety this year, Hamilton's probably the top guy, but the second and third guy are not that far off from what he does. And so from that standpoint, I don't think it's as pressing to do. But I also think if you're looking at the Giants getting rid of a safety, now they've opened up a really glaring hole that they need to fill. And so if they feel that Hamilton completes a need on the back end of a defense that has Zay already there, and now you can pair those two young guys and both of their versatility to be able to play any style of defense, then that's something that you do if you believe it's going to make you better over the long run. You don't care about positional value and all of that mumbo jumbo, which, by the way, positional value hasn't actually caught up with the game. I don't know if people have realized that yet, because defensive backs in a league where where passing is king, where you've got quarterbacks passing for 5,000 yards and multiple receivers on the team going for 1,000 yards. If you don't have defensive backs, you're not going to win games. And so with that being said, the pulling or choosing defensive backs should come higher, especially when you're talking about the back end, which is a safety position. So the positional value stuff hasn't even been updated to reflect what the league is looking for right now. So I think if Hamilton's a guy that the Giants need, if they feel as if it's going to really fill a hole, and they don't believe that the number 2 or 3 guy is anywhere near that number 1 guy, I think that's how you have to move, and you shouldn't care that he's a safety.
Yeah, there's, again, the consensus is that he is the top guy, but it's interesting you say that, because not a consensus in the people I talk to. I would just say, but definitely he's a top guy. Yes,
he's a top guy. But
yes,
I think people are falling in love with some of his attributes. But you see some things that he really needs to clean up in the way in which he plays the game. Once you get to this level, he's got a lot of that Palomalu in him. And while Palomalu's a Hall of Famer and a guy who made a lot of plays, he also put himself in a lot of bad positions. And the rest of the defense does not look like that Steelers defense looked when Palomalu was able to just freestyle all over the place.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Now, I want to talk about the Giants and free agency, what they have done so far, how they are setting themselves up for this draft. First off, let me just ask you a generic question here. Do you prescribe to the theory that free agency does set you up for the draft, or is it separate in your opinion?
I definitely think that what you do in free agency sets you up for what you're going to do in the draft. Because if you're committing positions and you're committing money, like especially legitimate money, then it's going to dictate A, what you can do, because you have to work underneath the salary cap, and B, who you're going to draft and what position, because those guys have to make your team. So I definitely think that who you pick in free agency is going to affect what you do in the draft.
All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, but without the calories and sugar. Most Built Bars contain around 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein, making it easy to fit into any diet plan. And they are available in nut and nut-free varieties. So head on over today to BuiltBar.com and use our special promo code LOCKED15 to save 15% off your first order. Again, that's code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. The Giants, they've signed 5 offensive linemen. I think they've only given one guy, Mark Lewinsky, a multi-year contract. Everybody else has gotten 1-year veteran salary benefits. So that being said, can we say that, first let's talk about, that strategy, and if you like that strategy, and then how is that setting them up, in your opinion, for the draft?
Well, I think we can pretty much pencil Lewinsky in as a guard, right? I mean, you don't pay an offensive lineman in free agency any money if you don't think he's going to be a starter. Like, you're not paying for backup offensive linemen. That's just kind of been the way in the NFL. You get backup offensive linemen at a bargain, and then you pay for starters. So Lewinsky's probably going to be a starter, probably should, because he's been the most accomplished and the most consistent of all of the offensive linemen that they've taken in free agency. But I do think it's interesting that of the 4 interior linemen that they've taken, 3 of them have positional flexibility. That tells me that they're probably not thinking guard center in the draft early. This is why I say that what you draft, what you sign in free agency affects what you draft. If they don't sign all of these interior offensive linemen in the draft, I think you could probably see an interior offensive lineman go with one of those first 3 picks. But now that they have those guys, are we going to really say that the other centers and or guards that are in the draft have a higher ceiling than the guys that they have already? We don't know that for certain. And these gentlemen, they're not old. They're not bringing in 34 and 35-year-old offensive linemen. They're bringing in late 20s, early 30s, or 30-year-old offensive linemen, guys who still have a lot of tread on the tire, guys who are chomping at the bit to find a home. So they're going to get the best. I think it's going to be a really interesting fight in training camp to see who comes out with these jobs. But with Garcia, who has extensive center experience from college and played and even, stepped in for Rodney Hudson in Arizona, for him to come in. We've already talked about Feliciano kind of being slated to play center, or at least to be there early on, but his value as a guard and a center as well. I think that when you look at that and you look at those guys, they probably are thinking to themselves, we want a veteran presence there and maybe not a rookie presence. You've already got one guard filled, so it's if another one of those 3 guys look good at guard, do you really need to run out and pick a guard with a high draft pick? Probably not. This tells me we're going to see a tackle go early. Like, I don't think there's any doubt about it. They have their eyes on probably 2 to 3 tackles that they really like, that's going to fall somewhere within their within that realm of where they have the pick. We're probably going to see a tackle go early. I think there's a really good chance they're going to package some picks. I think there's a really good chance they're going to package some picks to move up to get the guy that they really want. And I think their thought process is, let's take care of those bookends to make sure that we have our quarterback protected from the edge. We've got veteran presence up the middle, with guys that are more run-oriented guys too, and guys who have positional flexibility. We've got a guy to be a swing at any position, and we'll roll that way this year and see if there's changes that need to be made going into 2023.
And of course,
2023.
And of course, the advantage here is because it looks like that offensive line, the starting offensive line, is going to be mostly veterans. Now they can bring in the younger guys in day 2, day 3,
Absolutely.
get them ready. They don't have to rush to get these guys into the lineup. And also, I think part of that philosophy, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, is because you've got Daniel Jones, and this is kind of a make or break year for him. You want to put experience in front of him. You want to put a better quality group in front of him. Whereas last year the approach was, oh, let's run with the young guys. And that unfortunately didn't pan out. So I think they're taking the reverse approach here to get Daniel Jones to get this offense off the ground successfully.
Absolutely. I think what they want to be able to say after this year is they want to be able to say unequivocally, Daniel Jones is the guy or Daniel Jones is not the guy. They don't want to have a situation where, well, we could or we could. And now they want to be able to go into next year's draft where you're going to have Bryce Young most likely there. You're going to have C.J. Stroud most likely there. Those are right now the top 2 guys on the board as far as quarterbacks, and they're not question marks. Both of those guys are ball players. And if you don't think Daniel Jones is the guy, you want to make sure that you put those conversations to rest this season. You also have in place Tyrod Taylor, that if Jones isn't the guy and you know it early, but you think you have a team good enough to compete, you could turn it over to Tyrod Taylor and have him be that bridge to whomever you draft in 2023. And he's going to be a great veteran presence because we know that Tyrod Taylor has been a class act his entire NFL and collegiate career. So I think that they definitely want to put that veteran, the veteran savvy in front of Jones to take a little bit of pressure off of him to have to be able to communicate to the offensive line. I think they are going to want the offensive line to be able to communicate to Daniel Jones so that he can focus on coverages and not necessarily have to focus on protections like we see some quarterbacks have to do.
And that, of course, especially with a new offense, that can be a little bit too much, especially for a guy like Jones. You look back at last year 2 in the same system, and he still had trouble with, I think, the protections and reading the defenses, especially reading the defenses.
Yeah, and I think Jones is a smart football player, but that could be overwhelming to some people. So I don't think it's necessarily like him being able to pick up or understand the scheme, but we still haven't seen the game slow down. We talked about this last year, if you remember. We had a conversation about Daniel Jones and the game having to slow down for him, so he doesn't look so frenetic in the pocket. And the game still hasn't really slowed down yet for him. So the more you can take off his plate, the easier it is for him to just digest what he needs to digest and possibly play better. Josh Allen made his biggest leap when the Bills stopped asking him to throw the ball deep all the time. And they started letting him get the ball out of his hands super quick decisions, because that builds the confidence. So now when you come back with a deep shot, he's already had 5, 6, and 7 completions in a row. And so now his confidence is high, and that allows him to let that arm talent take over. And that's what we saw out of Josh Allen 2 years ago, and then we saw it pick up again the second half of last year and into the playoffs.
Do you think the Giants have asked a lot of Daniel Jones thus far, between making protection calls, reading the defenses? Do you think that's maybe the main reason why he hasn't, I guess, taken that leap that we all thought he could?
Well, I don't think they've asked him to do more than they ask any quarterback to do. But some quarterbacks just don't. They get overwhelmed by certain things. And I have to also say this. There's never been a quarterback who's ever had success when their coordinators continually change. And Daniel Jones has had now 3 coordinators in 4 seasons. And that's not, or 3 coordinators in 3 seasons. That's not going to coordinate to success on the field. I've done the research. No quarterback has ever had success when there was not continuity in the offense. And there's been no continuity in this offense in his time. So I will give him that. He's had to learn new things, new wrinkles, new ways, new terminology. That's never going to be a positive for improving and getting better. He's never had the opportunity to stack something in an off season. I mean, even last year, before they moved on from Jason Garrett, there was a legitimate flip of the way in which they were running offense 4 or 5 games into the season. And so, like, with that, you just don't get the continuity that you want. And I think that's definitely affected Daniel Jones. So hopefully, with the addition of these offensive linemen and whomever they add in the draft, it's going to give him a little bit more security up front to not have to worry so much about what's going on with those 5 guys in front of him.
Now, a big question I got yesterday when I did Twitter Tuesday is about the tight end. And admittedly, I am still kind of looking at the different tight ends. In this system that Brian Daboll is presumably going to run, which I believe is going to have a heavy Buffalo flavor to it, what kind of tight end is a good fit for what Daboll and maybe what Mike Kafka want to run? Kafka, obviously, they had Travis Kelce. They're not going to get a Travis Kelce in this draft, probably. But who's an ideal tight end? What kind of characteristics are we looking at? Or is the tight end kind of an afterthought in what Daboll maybe is looking to do?
I think it's an afterthought from the standpoint of the Daboll offense and the offense from Kansas City. They are predicated more on pass receiving tight ends. And quite honestly, it's so much easier to get a pass receiving tight end than it is to get a guy that you need to really get down there and root guys out. I thought if they were going to go that route, they would have went O.J. Howard. But they let O.J. Howard go to Buffalo, you know, in respects to that. So I think that you're going to probably see them add a pass receiver, another pass receiver, either via free agency or via the draft. I'm assuming that they let Evan Ingram go because the numbers that he wanted wasn't going to match what they were able to do because they're in this cap hell right now. And because I thought Ingram would have actually worked perfectly for what they do in their offense and their system and what they ask from a tight end. But again, he probably wanted more and got more from Jacksonville than what he was going to get from New York. So I think you could probably see them add a guy, a guy who's primarily a pass catcher, almost H-back type of body. Your 6'2", 240, 245, 50-pound guy who's got some athleticism to him and maybe is scrappy in the run game, but not really a legitimate run blocker. I think that's probably the guy you'll see them continue to try to look to add as depth or as a guy who could shake out as a pass receiving guy in those situations. I don't think you'll see a lot of 2 tight end sets. I wrote about that earlier. I think it'll be a lot of 11 personnel going forward because I think that's just what fits what they do best.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Ricky Seals-Jones, I don't think he's going to be the TE1. I maybe to start, but I think
he'll get the chance.
He'll get a chance.
You know, I think he'll get the chance. Will he shake out as a tight end 1? I don't know. I personally don't think his hands are where they need to be. We saw in Washington a lot of double clutching, a lot of inability to track the ball, and the fact that he doesn't bring a red zone threat with him, I think is a big negative on his tally. So I think they'll look to add somebody that's more dynamic as a pass receiver, which is weird to say because Seals-Jones played wide receiver in college, but he's kind of shaking himself out in the NFL as a guy who's a little bit more adept at blocking than he is a dynamic pass receiver. I think he's a good possession tight end.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about the defense because you said something earlier. You said that maybe the Giants package some picks. You know, they go offensive tackle, which I think we can all agree is going to be a high need. But given some of the moves they've made on the defense, do you see perhaps, okay, if they have to move the 7th pick, for example, can they get away with that? Or do you say to yourself, okay, you know what? Get a cornerback, especially if you trade Bradbury, which it looks like they might try to do, or they are trying to do. I don't know whether or not they do it or not. Do you say, we got to get ourselves a pass rusher, a Batman pass rusher? Or, are they able to take and mix and match what they've signed and make this work, or do they need to add to it?
I think that, and I think I probably say this every year, regardless of who's the coordinator, so I apologize, fans. I think we make a lot. We make a lot about going out and getting an elite level pass rusher. I just don't think we know. We can think we're getting a guy, but we don't really know. I remember last year, Aziz came out the gate strong, and everyone was like, "Oh, we found a pass rusher." Well, what are we doing now? Everybody's back talking about we need another elite level pass rusher, but I thought we had one in Ojulari. So I think what you see from Wink's defense is that you need guys who can cover man to man. So I think more than pass rusher, because they're going to blitz all the time. That's a Wink Martindale's defense. We're coming back to blitz happy Wink. So they're going to blitz all the time. You need guys that can cover. So to me, cornerback right now is probably more of a premium than edge rusher, especially because unless they're going up to 1, 2, or 3, they're not getting Thibodeau. They're not getting Hutchinson. Like, it's just not happening. The other guy from Michigan that I really like, he's injured, and that's unfortunate, but I don't saddle myself with an injured defensive end when I'm trying to make moves right now. Like, that's a luxury draft pick. I think he's going to fall to a team that really doesn't need a pass rusher right now, but says that talent is so good, we're willing to wait to see what he comes back from via injury. So when I look around at those top level guys, if they're not getting one of those two dudes, are you going to go a Walker somewhere around that, that middle of the first round? If so, you might be able to drop back from 7 and acquire another pick or so and get one of those second tier guys. But now you're back at the same thing. Well, what are we going to get a guy who's going to be dominant, or are we going to get just another guy? And I think that in your Wink defense, where it's going to be really more a committee because we're blitzing all over the place, you'll probably see them go heavy or look defensive end, possibly in the end of round 1, package some picks to get into the end of round 1 or move back into the end of round 1, or in day 2 where they've got those other 3 picks that are sitting there with the 2nd and the 2 and the 3rd. And they may be able to add more from there. It'll be interesting to see. I think the first pick will kind of set the tone on where they're looking to go, with the other 4 picks in that first 100 picks that they have guys in. But I believe it's going to be tackle. And then they're going to go most likely defensive back. And I don't know if that's going to be safety or corner, but I think from what I've seen them do in with all the free agency, it just makes the most sense. They've re-signed Martinez. You were never going to take a middle linebacker that high anyway, but they re-signed Martinez, so that takes away the need to bring somebody in day 1 for that position. You got rid of Logan, which I'm still surprised by, but you get rid of Logan Ryan, so there's a glaring need at safety. You don't have corners that you really feel comfortable with playing man-to-man on an island on a regular basis, play in and play out. And for nothing, they're probably going to have to move on from one of those guys because of what their cap situations are. And you're going to want to just continue to move forward for the future. So I could see them going offensive tackle with their first pick, and then with their second pick going defensive back. And if that happens, I could possibly see them packaging picks to maybe even get back into the first round to grab an edge rusher in the back end of the first round, or just waiting until day 2 and taking maybe even a double run on an edge rusher? Because some of the guys that they've signed, they have positional value because they can play multiple positions. And I think that we don't know where they're going to shake out at yet.
And for those who are concerned about the cap, if you package up some picks, then that's less guys you have to pay. So you
Absolutely.
can afford to move back into the end of the first round if there's a guy there that you want. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, with the ever-increasing number of makes and models, there's only one place to find what you need quickly for your car or truck, and that's at RockAuto.com. Rock Auto is a family business with over 20 years of offering competitive pricing on thousands of parts for every make, model, and manufacturer. Check out their website today, and don't forget to write down Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. RockAuto.com, amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car or truck will ever need. RockAuto.com. You know, Gene, you made a comment about Logan Ryan, and this is another question I got yesterday on Twitter Tuesday, and I think, you know, my eye is that, you know, why wasn't Logan Ryan a fit? You know, a lot of people say he wasn't a fit for what Coach Wink wants to do. I don't think Logan was used as a blitzer a whole lot, and I know Coach Wink likes to bring blitzes from all positions, you know, especially from that backfield, but why else do you think maybe Logan wasn't a fit for this defense?
I really don't know. I don't know that he's not a fit. I mean, if you look where he signed in Tampa. That's another blitz heavy defense. So, and they blitz their safeties, and they asked them to play at the second level a lot, which is what Logan Ryan has been doing a lot as well. So I'm not sure, as one of the leading tacklers on the team last year, and I believe the year before, he's been a guy who's been reliable as a physical safety. So I'm not really sure, but if you think that that Hamilton is the number one prospect in the draft, and you're sitting at 7, and you've made projections that says he's going to fall to 7, you believe you have a really good chance to get him. And if not, you probably have some contingencies in place. Getting rid of Logan Ryan does help. You know, it does help with the thing. And I also don't want people to lose the fact on, if you package picks, not only do you not have to sign as many players, but getting another first rounder means that you control them for that 5th year. That's big when it comes to how you have to maneuver and manipulate down the stretch. Even if you're not planning on keeping that player, having that 5th year option in the tuck to be able to use as a bargaining chip is something that's invaluable. And that's why you see people jump into the end of the first round a lot of times to get those picks.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and it again, you know, it kind of shakes out a little bit when you look at the cap, and plus the salary cap's going to jump up over the, you know, starting next year. The new TV revenue is going to kick in, and you're going to see massive jumps in the salary cap. And the Giants right now project to be much better condition with the salary cap starting next year, just in time for, you know, if they have to sign, you know, Saquon, or if they have to re-sign Danielle, or if they want to extend
and they have a good amount of expiring contracts too. Mm-hmm. So it makes it easier to maneuver next year than maybe it is to move this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, final thoughts on this draft, Gene. We have a few weeks to go before the draft kicks in. I think we both agree that tackles is going to be a top priority for this team. Where can you see maybe some surprises? Because, you know, every year the Giants seem to throw us a curveball and we say, holy crap, we didn't see that coming. Where, you know, from a talent evaluation, from a football X's and O's, where could you possibly see something happening that right now not a lot of people are maybe thinking about or talking about?
I think it's at that 7th pick. I think it's at their second pick of the first round. Because there's going to be so much need, and there's so many guys. I believe There are some people who have, I think I have probably close to 50 people with first round grades. So when you've got that much depth, like maybe this isn't the sexiest superstar draft, but there's a lot of really good football players. And there's going to be a run on wide receivers at some point. So if the wide receivers start going earlier than expected, you're going to see people trying to get up and get in position to get a receiver, because there are teams that absolutely cannot get out of this draft without getting a receiver. And since that's not something that is a top priority or need for the Giants, there may be opportunities for them to maneuver with that pick, maybe not once, but twice, if they believe that they can move down and still get the guy they're looking for. But if they move down, I would tell fans to be prepared. I don't think they're going to move down to add more picks this year unless they're trying to bunch those picks to move up again later on in the draft. I think you'll see them move down, add some picks for next season where they're going to be in a better position to know what they need, and because of the cap, be able to maneuver those pieces better.
And plus, because they have a lot of guys right now on 1-year contracts that they might want to move on from, because these guys
Absolutely.
are kind of stopgap solutions. Who, by the way, I mean, on paper, it looks like a better group, especially on that offensive line. But of course, we'll find out. There is a mini camp coming up in April. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to be. I want to say probably the week before the draft, based on history. So we'll probably get a little bit of a glimpse as to what's going on. Then, of course, we have the draft. Then there'll be the rookie mini camp. There should be another mini camp coming up. So a lot of opportunities to kind of get a feel for what direction this football team is going to take shape up. But right now I look at it as like you've got a bunch of corporate trainers coming in to kind of instill the new, locker room culture, the scheme, especially on offense. And, so far on paper, I mean, I guess I'm optimistic. I mean, but I say that every year because, you don't know. So.
What other way is there to be, though? Like, why would you come into a season before you ever see anything and be pessimistic? So, like, to me, it costs you nothing to be optimistic. And so the one thing Giants fans should be excited about is they are making moves that make sense. They're not going out and trying to bring in like overpriced, splashy, sexy picks. They're bringing in picks that make logical sense on how to build a team the right way. And I'm a lot less critical on Gettleman than other people are, but he left some good pieces in place. And there are some things that just didn't work out because those players didn't pan out to be what, he and pretty much everyone around the league thought they were going to be. Like, who knew Will Hernandez was going to regress this much? When the Giants made that selection, everybody celebrated it as a great selection.
Yeah. First
year in, everybody, that's a knockout. Who knew? Yeah. So it's like, we can, on hindsight, go back and say, oh, well, but in the moment, those picks were celebrated. Those picks, those decisions were ones that people said, hey, they're doing what they need to do to be successful. And I feel the same way about these selections. I think you can get in trouble with the offensive line trying to piecemeal stuff together. But I do like the fact that 2 of those 4 guys have legitimate experience in Brian Dable's offense and understand it. So even if they're not going to be the choice to play, they can be guys that help, like you said, help to bring in the culture and bring in the understanding of how the offense is going to be. But I'd be wary about bringing in so many guys to piecemeal, all these journeymen kind of coming in because they're mercenaries. They're looking for the opportunity to stick, but they understand I just have to be about me because I'm trying to get a contract for next year, or I'm trying to make the final roster. And so when you have that, are they really looking to teach? are they really looking to give a heads up to a guy that might, get them cut? Like, I don't know. And so that'll be interesting to watch unfold. But other than that, I've liked the moves.
I do too. I mean, and you're right. At this point, can it be any worse than it was last year? I mean,
Absolutely not.
yeah,
It
exactly.
was a
Nowhere to go
full-fledged
but up.
dumpster fire last year. So
Yeah,
we're
absolutely.
gonna stay away from that this year. It's gonna be much happier in the Giants country writers room when we're talking about what we're doing this week than it was last year, because there was some doom and gloom when it came to writing stories. It was like, I guess we'll, yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
definitely looking forward to more positive times.
So am I. So am I. All right, Gene. This was awesome. As always, appreciate your insight. Check him out, folks. He's got his own YouTube channel. I'll put the information in the show notes. He's also on Giants Country. I'll put his bio in the show notes, a link to his stuff. Great stuff. He's got more stuff coming out. And he's also over on at the Athletic. And I believe you're also doing work with Emery Hunt for football game plan. Am I correct?
Always, football game plans our baby, and so we
Yep.
continue to, to do things there. Check out any one of my podcasts, my Morning Talk Spicy podcast, Weekly Zebra Stripes podcast, and then my Gene Therapy podcast that's on CWN
Cool.
Sports. So check those out. I really do appreciate everybody. Make sure y'all subscribe to the channel though if you want to, kind of keep everything in one place.
Check him out, folks, before he becomes so big. Like Emery. Emery's become a big star too now.
I know, I make fun of him all the time. I'm like, you're big time now. You're
He
wearing
is big
all your
time.
suits.
I've only had him on the show once this year because it's like, Emery, you want to come on? And it's like scheduling him is such a, it's so tricky, but he's still a good dude. Still the best
No,
dressed man in all of sports, I think.
Yeah, he's a great guy and always down to talk football and that's the best part.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Gene, thank you again. Folks, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you're watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Make sure you keep it here on the LockedOn Giants podcast. We're going to have Rick Saratella from NFL Draft Bible. We're going to have eventually, I'm working to book the college hosts from Locked On, the various college programs and conferences. So they'll talk about their draft picks. A lot of stuff coming up. And also make sure you're checking out Giants Country. Gene's going to be writing some more stuff. We're going to really dive into this draft, do mocks. We're going to have draft analysis, all kinds of cool stuff you'll want to check out. Thank you for tuning in, everybody, and we will catch you again tomorrow.